Just after 7:45 here on the South African morning. Good to have you with us. I'm Gareth Edwards. A beautiful Friday morning, but I'm afraid it all could go tumbling into the darkness again because rolling blackouts have become a bit of a norm in the country over the past decade or so, and we've all come to deal with workarounds, whether that's a UPS if you're lucky, a generator if you're very lucky. At the very least, it's going to be cases of candles and batteries. Now there's calls by opposition parties to declare this a state of disaster over at Eskom, the issues there, and that it wants to be discussed at the next cabinet meeting, all the opposition parties. Energy expert Chris Yelland joining us this morning. Hello to you, Chris. Always good to have you on the show with us. So do you agree or disagree for the call for this to be declared a state of disaster?
Well, I don't think we are in a state of disaster yet. That has a legal definition. We are, I do believe, in a crisis and in a state of emergency, and that could change to become a state of disaster if, for example, the country moves into what is known as a partial or a total national blackout. There is a risk of this. It is a small risk, I must stress, but it is a risk that has to be taken seriously and is taken seriously both by Eskom, by insurance companies, and we should all know that it is a possibility, but not the probability is not high. But if we do nothing and we just let things continue, we've seen the energy availability factor decline year on year for many years, and it is declining further this year. The first 17 weeks of this year, the EAF is much lower than last year. So we have to do something, because if we don't do something, we will make this move from a state of emergency to a state of disaster.
What is that something we need to do? Because it seems every time I speak to a politician or a cabinet member, there are always plans, aren't there, Chris? We've got task teams and we're having meetings and briefings. There's a lot of talking, but no one seems to actually be doing anything concrete on the day, not to my mind, because all of these seem to be medium to long-term solutions.
I agree with you. Far too much talking, far too little action. Yes, planning, committees, working groups, task teams, etc., etc. But I do have a feeling that in this work, we are not working together. There are a whole lot of silos. To give you an example, I think government has its own silo, the private sector has its silo, customers of electricity have its silo, municipalities have their silo, the regulator seems to operate on its own, and we're not pulling together. And even within government, there are a whole lot of silos that don't seem to talk to each other. For example, Department of Forestry, Fisheries and Environment, Department of Mineral Resources and Energy, Department of Public Enterprises, COGTA, the Presidency, Operation Vulindlela. All these structures are not well integrated and don't seem to be working with a common vision and a common purpose. In fact, quite often, the messaging coming from some of these departments is completely contradictory, like messaging about coal coming from the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy seems to be at odds with the messaging from the Presidency, from the Presidential Climate Commission, from the Environmental Department, etc. So really there's a cacophony of noise instead of working together with a common purpose. So I believe we need to really put our mind towards a national project that can coordinate all these different stakeholders and get us working with a common purpose towards a common goal.
And Chris, we'll maybe come back to how we can get all of these various silos and these organizations into the same room in a moment. I would like to, just for the benefit of our viewers, how bad a situation do you foresee for this year? Because we can't, as the public, do much about the working committees and the various silos. Yes, they exist, but people want to know what is the worst case scenario, according to Chris Yelland, that you foresee this winter and for this year ahead?
Yeah, so look, let's just look at this year ahead. And I want to say, it's not me, Chris Yelland, it's not my idea or view or etc. But take a look at the Eskom website. On there's a section called Eskom Divisions. One of the divisions is Generation, and in there you will see a folder called System Status Report. And if you have a look at the latest report, which is week number 17, it has a table of the outlook, the risk outlook for load shedding for the next year. In other words, it's a week-by-week table, and it looks at the next 52 weeks ahead, and they are color-coded. Each week is color-coded either green or yellow or orange or red. And Eskom's own table shows that for all 52 weeks of the year, except for 3 weeks in the year ahead, it's color-coded red, which means a high probability of load shedding. So you don't have to take it from me. You have to take it from the people that are generating the electricity. They are telling us that we're in code red for the next year. So that's where we stand, and something has to be done about it. And it's not that Eskom can solve this problem on its own. It's said repeatedly that it cannot solve this problem. It can work on a bit of maintenance, can work on Medupi and Kusile, but it needs new generation capacity, and that's going to come from either the customers of electricity, or it's going to come from the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy through its IPP office. That's only going to come in 3 years' time. So what are we going to do in the next 3 years? That's what we need to put our minds to, how we can mobilize the country to come up with solutions that can cut out load shedding in the next 3 years.
And when it now comes to a final solution, if you will, for Eskom, Chris, before I say goodbye to you, a lot of people want to know what would it take to get Eskom back up and running. So if you had to have all the money in the world and you were able to give it to Eskom, how quickly could they fix this issue? Imagine money was no issue at all. How many years would it take for Eskom to be back where it should be? As a last question to you, Chris.
You know, I think the thought of restoring Eskom to its former glory is completely misguided. Eskom is never going to go back to what it was. The world has changed. The world of energy has changed. There's a move away from centralized power generation to distributed embedded generation and self-generation. Eskom will always be, I believe, an important player in the sector, but we're not going to go back to Eskom as the monopoly generator of the past. That is just not on. It's too risky. It's putting all our eggs in one basket. We need a diversified, competitive generation sector. That's where our efforts need to be directed, not to spending money and restoring Eskom to its former glory. Really, that's misguided.
Okay, well, Chris, I always appreciate your time. I think many people would agree with you. Misguided is not the way we want to go here. We need to move into a new future of energy generation. Chris Yelland, energy expert, joining us here on ENC, energy sector analyst. Tumza, so it's not looking good. According to Eskom's own website, the next few weeks are in the red if you go and look at that chart that Chris was talking about on the Eskom website. Wish I had better news. I'm afraid I don't.